The psychedelic revolution is here. If you want to integrate your visionary experiences into your purpose, get clear on your entrepreneurial path, and help people while you do what you love, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to The Psychedelic Entrepreneur, Medicine for These Times. I'm your host, Beth Weinstein. I'm a spiritual business coach, 3-time entrepreneur, and a lifelong student of psychedelics and sacred plant medicines. You carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times. This podcast will help you to share your medicine so you can create transformation in the world. Listen in on conversations with psychedelic leaders, changemakers, and conscious entrepreneurs who are living proof that a better world is possible when you follow your heart and live in alignment with your soul. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Medicine for These Times. I'm so excited to finally have Zahara Zimring here with us today. Hi, Zahara. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Beth. I'm so glad we made it happen.
Yeah. I know. I remember, I think, reaching out to you for an interview like 7 years ago. And then just, you know how it is, divine timing. Mm-hmm. Here we are. And I'm so excited to get to know you and talk about what's alive, because this is actually... This topic we're going to dive into today is so alive for me and so many people I know, by the way. It seems to be like a common, theme out there in the world. Mm-hmm. But let me tell people a little bit about you. So Zahara's a martial artist turned liberation artist, transformational mentor, and ceremonialist. She is the creator of the Dojo Initiation, an ecosystem of transformational arenas that shatter limitations while offering safe and emergent spaces for participants who become family to expand beyond their edges and embody their highest design while being deeply championed in community. Once an elite martial artist and Olympic hopeful who ultimately overcame a debilitating spinal fusion, Zahara is passionate about helping others turn trauma into triumph and wounding into warrior wisdom. A practitioner of spiritual psychology, intuitive channeling, and shamanic arts, she's found her purpose in a deep study with master plant teachers and creating safe spaces for others to heal, transform fear, and remember themselves whole while reclaiming empowerment in all areas of life. I love this so much. Well, I want to hear your background. I knew about your background as a martial artist, which, by the way, is so that's so hardcore. It's like, whoa. I'm trying to think. I think maybe one other person who is a dedicated capoeira master, but other than that, it's a very rare thing. But I'm curious to hear your story. What led you on this path of, your spiritual work, your work serving people out there in the world. And I always love to know, did you used to have some other traditional career as a corporate attorney or something?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, first of all, I have the movie Three Ninjas and the Karate Kid to thank for introducing me to the dojo. At 8 years old, I remember my brother and I were watching these martial art movies, and he got inspired, told my grandparents, I want to do karate. And they got him into Taekwondo close enough and asked if they wanted to get me into it, just as a young woman to learn self-defense. And it turned out anything I think they would have put me in sport-wise at that time, I would have just kind of gotten my teeth into it and gone for it. And so Taekwondo was the thing. And I really found my passion inside the dojo. Growing up, I navigated one of my parents in and out of treatment for chemical dependency, and as a very watery being, astrologically, I've always had a very strong emotional body. And, of course, as a young child, it's like, where do you put all of that? You don't have the tools. It's not a part of our culture, really, to teach young children emotional intelligence and how to move that big energy. And the dojo was the place inside of which I would go to train. Retrospectively, I recognize it was the place I would go to move that big energy. It was the place I would go to express myself and to really get free. And so that became a really fundamental reference point for me growing up. And as I got older, there's another story that ran peripherally, which is I was diagnosed with scoliosis also at age 8, the time I started Taekwondo. And I wore a back brace for 20 hours a day. The only time I could take it off was to shower and go to the dojo. So it was literally like limitation in the brace and then liberation in the dojo. So the dojo was literally the place I would go to get free. Fast forward, I went to Rice University in Houston. One of the best teams in the world for Taekwondo was based in Houston. And I got sick and had a second spinal surgery. That could take the whole podcast up. And it was my journey of, being in the hospital for 18 days, having to fly back to St. Louis to recover from this spinal surgery that took me out of the Taekwondo, the dojo. That's when I stopped training. But it didn't take the reference point that the dojo gave me for what it feels like to be truly passionate about what it is that you're doing, how you're expressing yourself, out of me. And so that reference point lived on even after I stopped training. But for a time after I graduated from college, I went into sports and entertainment, thinking the next best thing would be to support the dreams of other athletes. And I'll give you guys solve the mystery for everyone. It's not the same. I was sitting behind a desk, is not the same as being the athlete living out your dreams on the field. And so it was during that era that I feel like my ego kind of got hooked on the self-worth that comes from moving up quickly within an agency world, the glitz and glamour of, I became the executive director of marketing, and it was like from the outside in, this is what it looks like to be happy. But from the inside out, it wasn't the Taekwondo feeling. It wasn't the feeling I had from age 8 to 20 while I was in the dojo every day of like, this is passion. This is what my desire, this is the feeling of being timeless, of flow, right? I didn't have that. And so I started getting depressed in the agency world, and I had no reference point of what it feels like to go through a conscious ego death. And so I started numbing myself with prescriptions, going to Western medical doctors. I'm depressed, I can't sleep, I have anxiety behind this desk, but I'm successful with the Mercedes on Rodeo Drive and all the things. But what's wrong with me became the question, because this seems to be what you're supposed to do. And it turns out that I am only getting more and more depressed as the years go on. And so it was my journey ultimately of getting off all of the prescriptions. I went to inpatient treatment a little over 11 years ago, and I got off all the prescriptions, and that was the turning point that catalyzed my journey into personal development. And it was interesting because in treatment in Newport Beach, in a beautiful home with 10 women that are in various stages of, chemical dependency and getting off of much harder drugs than I was on. Mine were prescriptions. Some of the women were getting off heroin and had been in treatment like 3 times or 5 times, or families that are afraid that they might not make it. And yet, in the midst of beautiful sunsets and yoga every day and EMDR and hypnotherapy and group trauma healing, which is essentially sitting in circle with women talking about real stuff, that I found the Taekwondo feeling again. Wow. I found my place of timelessness, and I'm a very scorpionic being. I like to be in the real. I like to be in the deep. And it, ironically, in the midst of my ego death is where I found my new life.
Wow. I love it. What a story. Holy crap. By the way, I love that are you a Scorpio sun or
Scorpio sun, Cancer moon, and Pisces rising. Oh my God. And they're all, it's an 8th house Scorpio sun with a Pluto conjunction and a 4th house Cancer moon and Pisces rising. So it's all that water. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I find that fascinating. So many people share that same story of, having all the success, getting, executive marketing at an agency and living the life. And I know because I was there, and a lot of my clients come from that line where it's like the programming was so deep, at least in my upbringing, where it's like, it was like, just get a job, make lots of money, and you'll be happy. And then I was like, well, wait a second. Like, here I am, you know, because I was the same thing, like living New York City life, making all this money. And it was like the only way we could actually make sense, because I say we, if like I look back on like all my friends and that kind of whole community, the only way we could make sense of living that life was just go get wasted all the time.
Totally.
And everybody was on drugs. It was almost like a meme, like kind of a joke. Like, oh, it's New York City. Of course everyone takes sleeping pills. Of course everybody's on anti-anxiety and everybody's on antidepressants. And then we all work 12-hour days and make all this money and then go out and drink heavily. And it was just this cycle, you know, that's like, it doesn't get us anywhere. So I love hearing these kind of, you know, these initiations, these experiences of awakening.
Yeah.
So then tell us a little bit about, you know, what you do now and then how it translated from, you know, that initial experience of being back in the dojo. Because I love that you know, you call it this dojo versus just like a women's circle.
Yes.
And how is it, and how is it different than just like, you know, as I sometimes will make fun of it, even though I go to them all the time. We had one for my friend's birthday on Saturday night. But, you know, it's like there's so many like fluffy kind of circles out there that are like, eh. And I'm like you. I have a lot of Scorpio in my chart and Sag. And how is it different? And why is it important that it's different, by the way?
Yeah. It's so interesting as you name that. It's beyond words. There's a texture of realness with the dojo. It's very much anchored in an intelligence that goes beyond any one of us. There's a field that I've experienced expanding as a function of each woman who enters the field. So there's like a collective intelligence that helps to inform what is happening next, and also whose channel wants to open in service of the moment. And so this is emergent field work, which is we're really each part of the ecosystem. At this point, it's beyond one container. There's an ecosystem of containers within the dojo initiation. And each step along the way of the ecosystem emerged naturally. There was never like a whiteboard that I sat with. Now we're going to be turning into the 6th year, 6 years ago, saying this is each part and this is what it's going to look like. So in each container, I also don't sit with a whiteboard and say this is each part and this is what it's going to look like. We really utilize the dojo as the space inside of which we go to train, the space inside of which we make contact with the leading edge of our life. And instead of prescribing a set of modalities, and this is exactly what we're doing first, and coming in with a premeditated idea of what I think each woman needs, we actually utilize the emergent intelligence of the curriculum that's alive in each sister's life, knowing that with our powers combined, with the circle of oracular channels that we are, that whatever is needed most will emerge within the field. And so there's the Liberation Dojo and the Ritual Concert that are standalone, several hour-long experiences that are a little bit lower touch, but also very deep, that individuals can enter into. And then there are multi-month containers and initiatory experiences that individuals who want to go deeper can enter into. So the structure of each is very different, but the intention and the thread that runs through at the heart is congruent, and that is to expand beyond the place that fear holds us back in our lives and meet the version of ourselves that lives free on the other side. And so if we're in the Ritual Concert, we use the technology of the medicine wheel, the technology of sound, the technology of freestyle art to actually be pulsing at the leading edge, to invite those who are present in the audience to meet each phase of life with a new level of consciousness and expansion, but using these certain kind of technologies and techniques, we go through a journey of the medicine wheel of life cycles, ages, and phases. And it's very emergent what happens within each one of those. So there's a dynamic structure. With the Liberation Dojo, there's a dynamic structure, but it's very much a function of who's actually there on that day that determines what happens. So I'm actually pulsing on the leading edge with everybody while we go through these experiences, and have to be very deeply willing to mess it up. I have to be very deeply willing to not get it right. I have to be deeply willing for the answer not to come or to fail. And it's I feel from that vulnerable pulse point of me actually sitting right next to the places I fear, and I have experienced those things, it most often compels a level of connection and relatability and integrity, so that there's a certain courage that and willingness that is evoked in the field that creates a special brand of magic, I would say, that I see as a uniqueness in the dojo field. And then from that, emergence of what is uniquely meant to be had and can only be created by the constellation of beings that are present on that day in that experience, that's where it's like the sprinkler effect of people expanding through being of service to the moment and also receiving from the moment happens. So it's been a dance for me of holding emergent leadership, where the energy needs kind of a tip of the spear to move, and it needs a structure to be held, while also releasing control and releasing the idea that I have to hold it all myself, so that there's room and deep trust, which has been an initiation of my own. The dojo really does dojo me and all of the women as we go and as we grow. We have a membership container now. There's a council of women who have been fully initiated that come on as co-facilitators and co-leads. And so there's really just this expansive, beautiful ecosystem that there's unique textures in each container, but the through line is that devotion to expanding beyond the place fear holds us back and deeply staying the course no matter what.
Oh, I love this. Thank you so much for sharing. So I was going to say, no, I think it's great that you bring this up. It's interesting running groups like you do, like I do. I talk about this a lot with clients. It's so fascinating. A lot of people come to me and they want to plan out their entire program, right? Their whole container, their whole journey that they're going to take clients on. And, the first thing I say to them is you have to meet people where they're really at. I know I've been in some programs where it's laid out and there's a curriculum, and it's the facilitator, the leader isn't really paying attention to what's happening. And it just gets kind of stale. It doesn't really work properly. And people lose interest. But if it's okay, this is an environment where we do have to pay attention to what's alive and what's coming through, and at the same time still hold the as you mentioned, the structure for the container. And this is where I've just found this exponential growth is when it's kind of in community that way, with leaders, but it's not too loose, because that just gets sloppy and doesn't make anybody feel safe. But people who want to plan everything out and have this step by step, it just, first of all, nature doesn't work like that, So I love that you're doing this, and I love that you also mention being a leader like this and allowing yourself to maybe get something quote wrong or do it messy, or you being vulnerable. And it's interesting because I've become more and more vulnerable with clients over the years, where it's I have nothing to hide. But when I first started many years ago, there was always that feeling of I have to be this person that doesn't have problems and they don't need to know about this. But it's the depth of where we can go together. And the depth of where I can lead is so much deeper and bigger and more expansive the more I'm just being my true self and actually just naming it out there transparently. But yeah, let's talk about this, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions around, especially, by the way, with social media. You know, everybody looks up to leaders and they all look perfect and they're living these great lives. And then we also see, by the way, the opposite of people that are like, oh, here's my generic sob story. You know, it's like, and that's starting to feel like a little fake now too, where people are like, there's something about that. But yeah, what do you believe is like the leadership we need for these times that we're in and entering into? You know, you mentioned emergent leadership.
Yeah. I mean, one of the main qualities I feel is central for leadership when it comes to the kind of leader I want to be and the type of leader that I would like to stand with or that I learn from is a deep willingness to make contact with their own vulnerability and a deep willingness to be honest and thorough in their own process of transformation. And I think the best leaders are the ones who have been absolutely pummeled by life and navigated without, I mean, even with resistance, but learned how to release resistance to life's seasons and recognize the precision of the curriculum that is coming in and what it's bringing up for us to be with and look at and heal through and transform through, even if that means not being in the limelight for a while, even if that means feeling completely dismantled, even if that means a big passage of grief. And usually with, you know, the leaders that I look up to most and the leader I want to be, I see these big curriculum seasons coming through like pretty strongly. And I feel like from that place of being thorough, there's just a natural attractiveness for those that we are meant to support, or those that are meant to be supported, or those that we're meant to be supported by. And so I find, you know, the one mistake that I am seeing in myself as a leader is anywhere that I've gone into effort or like need to prove that what we're doing within the dojo field is amazing and could really help somebody. Like if I'm coming from any lack or effort, there's a miss there that will ripple into the relationship, that will ripple into the client, you know, guide dynamic. And so I'm really like seeing that where the dojo field and where my own work as a leader has been the most effective is in the space of naturalness, in the space of magnetism that comes from a relaxed devotion to my own integrity and a trust that those who I actually am designed to support will naturally gravitate toward that support, and that support will ripple through them into the ones that they're meant to support. And as they expand in their leadership, that we will link arm in arms and mutually support one another. And that's what I'm seeing happen in the natural design of the dojo field over the last 6 years. Is there's this emergent experience of empowered leaders being born through the field and learning how to link arms and really mutually support and mutually amplify and collaborate, so that everything that's really needed most is present in the field, even if it's not directly coming through me in the moment. And so I think the leaders that I also respect the most are the ones who are either aware of or willing to become aware of and own their own blind spots, like anywhere that there's a coming from a lack or a coming from a pressure or an attachment to the identity of leader, the attachment to the identity of guide, and how we get a pulse of energy from that identity structure. I see that there's often a dismantling process that needs to happen in order to come into like real, true, natural leadership, right? There's a coming into the power of one's leadership while also sharing leadership all at once. And I think it's pretty easy to pendulum from one to the other, like to completely abdicate your leadership if you're going through a tough season, or to overly hold on to leadership. And I'm really in this season learning through being on either side of that pendulum, and aiming to, like, through the humbling pummeling, come into a sweet place in the center where there's not an abdication of my shape, there's a holding of my shape and a standing in my power and a speaking from the truth of my design, while also letting go of any attachment of it always needing to, be me holding the thing, and having true room and a yielding to other really beautiful, powerful leaders, because we're all doing this together, and it's like flocks of birds flying in the V. There's like a learning and a rotation of a timing of who's designed for this moment most.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. This is interesting. This has come up a lot lately in some trainings that I've been in. And, we've talked about leaders and facilitators really not doing the level of their own inner work as they maybe could or should. And what happens is very often, and I think more and more people are waking up to this, where it's like just even the energy of being around people that are, like maybe it's like too needy or too grabby or self-conscious or, struggling with their own storyline or their own programming around their ability to, quote, get people results. And I see this a lot as a business coach. This is something a lot of my clients struggle with, where they feel this, they come in their earlier, most of my clients are in their early stage of their business, where they feel like, well, I need to fix someone, or I need to get them results. And I'm like, I have to kind of reprogram their whole way of thinking about it. And I'm like, no, that's not it. And the more people have that, it's like weird energy. And, there are, of course, there's definitely still people out there that are coming from maybe the not so skillful integrity. And you mention integrity, and I talk about that a lot, where it's like, really holding yourself in this purity of knowing, like, if you're in right relationship with yourself, if you're in right relationship with your intention for, the container you're holding, like, that's the starting point, and to really be aware of yourself and your energy, and also be okay with, like, being human. I think I think everybody knows this by now. It's like, gone are the days of the guru. Yeah. It's like we want the human leader. We want the true heart-centered leader that's showing the vulnerability and okay to not always be in charge and like, let it be kind of self-led by the community. I love this. And, I want to ask about, because we were talking a little bit off camera beforehand about, like, what you and I are both going through. And of course, it's like, I feel like I'm constantly in an initiation, but it's definitely been, this last few weeks and a lot of the last few years, really. But, and, like, change happening and growing pains. I came to a breaking point in my business about 2 years ago, where it was like, it was growing, and I was on that trajectory of, like, do I just keep going? And what do I really want? And I see this happening with one of my good friends right now, where it's like, there's a point where it has to become really sustainable and, like, regenerative and feel good, and not just on this mission for all the wrong reasons. And, we see this a lot in this world of, like, it's like, what's next, and how do we grow, and how do we grow in a way that feels really good to not just us, but those we serve. I'm curious, what's been your experience with these growing pains, and how to navigate through it as a leader?
Yeah, I really feel that we create what we need the most. And I recognize that with the dojo I named, this kind of through line of expansion, expanding beyond the place where fear holds us back, expanding beyond our protection mechanisms and ways that we control our way away from feeling feelings we're afraid to feel, so that we can really feel that nervous system strength and infrastructure of support relationally and socially, so that we are courageous enough to step forward beyond that threshold and take those risks and expand our threshold of tolerance to hold ourselves, even if the thing we fear most were to happen. So that expansion piece is a big part of the field, while also is the connection piece and the safety and intimacy that we build through community and our main pillars there. And so I feel, that my passion for the dojo, I didn't even realize how much I needed the field that I've stewarded in seasons of, breakdown and dismantling. And I feel that the dojo's me every year of the 6, relative to a lifetime body of work, that's not very long. And also relative to the path I've walked so far, it feels like it's been a juicy 6 years. And I really see how each spin on the spiral, there's been another level of stretch in order to hold the growth, in order to hold the new energy. I've had to expand beyond that edge. I've had to expand my threshold of tolerance. I've had to explore my capacity and where my limits, my true limits are, and where the places are that I actually need to go through these micro deaths, sometimes they feel macro, in order to be able to hold more with the integrity that we're speaking of, which includes seeing where I thought that I was holding it in the way that I would need to for the next phase, but then to realize, oh wow, retrospectively, that version of me had to go through a spin cycle, and I bring compassion and love for the blind spots of that version from this version. And so there's definitely a version of that happening in this season as well. It's a lot around, there is a growth of the field. I've partnered with one of the women, Naya, who is from one of the original cohorts of the dojo core initiation. And we've launched the Dojo Woman Collective, which is a membership for women to come in and experience the field with weekly connection and expansion calls, without the larger multi-month commitment and deeper, energetic time and financial commitment that the core initiation requires, which it means for the first time we're receiving more energy, more beings, and it's growing. And so one thing we never want to lose is that depth, the depth that we're able to touch within the field. And there's a stretching for me happening in this season that is around, it's really hard to put into words. It's around like the one woman in the council gave an example of like holding a bow and arrow, and the way that you have to hold the bow tightly enough to keep enough tension on it in order to aim direction, and so that it will go. But if you hold it too tight, it'll go out of direction, or it'll break, or it'll fall out of the the tightness. But so you can't really hold, it's a danger of holding it too tight. And I've seen where I've held my own creation too tight, and that can suffocate it. We could translate this to imagine your relationship field. I think anything that's natural and true, we get excited about it, it's growing, and then we can start to like over-manage it, over-control it, over-hold it, and that suffocates the creation. At the same time, it's important, and then I could see the part of myself that would react to that and then like let go too much. And then there's then the bow is really loose and there's not enough tension on it or direction for it to actually hold. It's like, if we go into a spiral of self-judgment or being hard on ourselves, then it's like we might pendulum and I was over-holding, and now all of a sudden I'm under-holding because I don't want to get in the way of anyone else from holding, or I don't, being careful. And so I'm going through like this dismantling process of the part that would overhold, the part that would underhold and be careful, and arriving in whatever time is true into, I pray, I'm still in my process, but a sweet spot in the middle that really knows how to and when to stand in my leadership, hold the shape of the tension and the direction that is my role as my personal part of this ecosystem, while also having a precise attunement to when it's time to let go without abdicating myself. And so there's such a sweet spot in there that is a part of the process in this season. I mean, there's many layers of letting go, I feel, of ways of being that worked in prior seasons and potentially were needed and are now going through an expiration. And those parts that thought that they knew, I have a lot of exploration right now around that which I thought I knew, the part of me that will make meaning of the happenings in my life, the part of me that will make meaning of the synchronicities and the direction that I think it's going. And then I feel like life just keeps humbling me and I could say pummeling me and into this place of surrender. And it's, I think, our choice whether we go into submission, which is faithless, like submission of just like, I'm losing my faith. I'm in, I'm like not holding that faith that's needed, while the healthy way forward or the way forward that I'm aiming for is surrender and surrender to seeing the places where I'm being shown where I can get ahead of life, where I can make meaning and think I know what's happening. And then life is like, surrender, like, hold on. It's actually not in my timing. It's in life's timing. So I'm in this interesting time of celebrating some real growth and expansion within the field that I've been holding over the last 6 years, while also in a real season of recognizing that the timing of these next seasons of growth, it's never been up to me. And this field has always grown at the pace of a plant, And so like the idea of we're doing our launch now and this is the next thing that we're doing, that has never worked. And it's not the way the way the dojo field is being held. It's very much like an attunement to timing, which includes my timing, the timing of my dojo life partner, Naya, who's holding it with me, and all the women in the council who are holding it with me, and just a really deep listening to, are we in harmony with what life wants? And usually we can feel whether we're getting that affirming energy or it's really a time to slow down and look within and do that internal work without pressing into a new frontier before it's time. Because that's when I think some of the bigger, harder lessons can come in.
Yeah. Oh, so well said. So well said. I know. And that's, that's something I feel like I've been feeling for the last few years, especially as life changes. I shared on off camera, my mom, potentially towards the end of her life, and that's like a whole other job that I'm navigating. That's like, oh, I didn't sign up for that job, but here I am. And really, having to listen and pay attention to like, okay, well, what is it today? What is it this moment, and not just going through the motions of like, oh, here's like what I've done, or here's what I know. Because we are constantly like dying and rebirthing, and there's always this newer version of ourselves, and that might mean that, okay, it's like doing something completely different. Or even like I actually have had a lot of clients, especially the last few years, like cut major cords in their business, like entire therapists cutting off, like, I don't even want to see clients anymore. But then, and it's scary, it's like jumping off the cliff, and what they really want to be doing starts to come through. And it's just, it's like you said, like the human mind, and how much we look for the stories and the knowing, and it's like when you say that, making meaning. We're constantly trying to make meaning. Of course, this is like how the ego mind is designed, and it's hard to surrender. But why is it that the more we surrender, everything just seems to start to move in the right energy? But even to have people try to like let go a little bit and at least have the awareness, like, okay, how much am I trying to control this? How much am I thinking that I know? And in the end, we're all just little babies, right? Like still trying to learn how to crawl. I love it. But I want to ask you a little bit about, you mentioned your design, and I know you mentioned that you're an astrologer, and I'm wondering, do you bring your astrology and human design and this kind of, any other gene keys, anything else into your work that you do in the world? I mean, how do you use it when it comes to, doing business?
Yeah, I mean, I started out in my early part of my transition into the personal development space with evolutionary astrology and working with my teacher, Stephen Forrest, who is a prolific, amazing evolutionary astrologer. Highly recommend looking him up. And I really focused on that for the first several years of my path. And I got very pigeonholed, I feel, into the identity of astrologer, where a lot of people knew me as that. And so I put that tool back in the belt and stopped being forward facing and really doing readings with it in the same way for a long time. And that really opened up this whole season relative to the dojo. And now in our core initiation, there's part 2 of our core initiation is called Dojo Masters, and inside that container I've now created a framework that is rooted in the wisdom of evolutionary astrology, and within that framework is all the juicy emergence that we could ever ask for, but I do now weave it into a part of the dojo ecosystem, and within the membership as well I'll bring in astrological transmissions and downloads. And for myself on my day-to-day, I really pay attention to where the astrological energies are moving relative to my own birth chart. And so just the integrity of that, I started working with it again all the time for myself. I started to weave it back into the field that I'm holding because it really works for me, and so I want the women to have the experience of working with it as well. And I feel there's context that the wisdom of astrology can provide, especially during seasons that are more winter-y, internal and shedding and letting go. And specifically the progressed moon phases have been super supportive for me in this season, recognizing I have a progressed balsamic moon in its last 4 degrees, which means over the next 4 months, my progressed moon will make its new moon for the first time in 30 years. And so it's a 30-year process, this progressed moon cycle. And so it's a really big turning point and also a very wintry. It's the progressed balsamic moon is like the progressed waning crescent, like the very last. If you imagine the moon in the sky, it's when the moon is waning, disappearing all the way into its dark moon phase, the new moon. And so it's like almost like you and everything you thought you were and everything you thought you knew and everything that we have attachments to and all the infrastructures of support that we thought that we needed. And it's start this real passage of letting go and shedding, but also the emergence of vision and the preparatory period that is required in the becoming process, the nervous system that we gain, the self-confidence that we gain when this is done well, of navigating our own internal terrain through just feeling more internal, like less prone toward social, being really out in the world. I've been very cavey this summer, interestingly, but I'm in a winter moon phase. I'm very, internal. It was a good time for me to do my dieta. I was just very in. And so I've been in these internal traversing these internal territories and seeing and feeling the places that I've been most afraid of, while also witnessing on the external level, like some significant shedding, both in levels of identity and also relationally, and my, just my soulmate dog is very much still here, but was diagnosed with cancer. And there's just a lot of transition in the wind, and it's bringing up deep grief and a lot of pieces that I would, on a conscious level, very much prefer not to ever have to experience. And I just have to trust. This is where faith comes in. Like when the moon enters its darkest time, this is where the darkest before the dawn comes in. That's where faith is required most, where all you have is your prayer. All you have is your faith, and then in that new moon, then the moon starts slowly progressing 1 degree a month. The progressed moon moves 1 degree a month and begins to wax again. And so, for myself in January, that progressed new moon will be exact. And then 1 degree per month, that moon will start to become visible again. And so that's where there's that which is cultivated in the darkness, that which the light that comes from facing into the dark. The fearlessness, the courage, the strength, the awareness, the intuition, the attunement to the other worlds, the instinctual body, that guidance that can only come from stillness and the deepest listening starts to become known, as the moon moves into its first quarter. And, so there's a deep process, and you happen to be catching me while I'm right in the last 4 months of that waning crescent balsamic progressed moon. And I have to say, it's been so gorgeous up until and even, I would say the last month and a half, there have been a series of unfoldments that have really been challenging catalysts that are now making this final 4 months period of this progressed balsamic phase feel quite real. Now I'm like, oh, now I see when they all been talking about. Okay, I got it, But having that context is what allows me to bring a little levity right there and be like, I'm in it, guys, like right now. Like I'm in many a process that I have not been specific about. There's a lot of shedding, a lot of triggers that are hitting core wounds. And what helps so much about astrology is that I have the context that seasonally it's actually appropriate for me to be way more internal and in this shedding and in this letting go and being with the pain just as much as the pleasure and strengthening in that way, where if I didn't have that context right now, I would be having a much more challenging time, actually, I feel. Yeah.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing this. It's funny because, I have this astrologer who also studied evolutionary astrology, and he's a good friend of mine. I give all my clients sessions with him, and I wonder if this is the same thing he does. I mean, it's an orientation where your life is, essentially these cycles, like every 3-4 months is a different phase of the moon. But it's your life. It might be different, but it might be similar. I don't know, because sometimes it's very over my head. Mm-hmm. But I'm in my waning crescent. No, wait, sorry, waning half moon right now. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because I've been doing this with him for a few years now, and I have been tracking it. And it is so precisely on point that it's just mind-blowing. But exactly like you said, it has helped me. I say to all my clients, it feels like there's a beacon. Like I just have a beacon where I know if shit hits the fan or something horrible happened or a breakup or a death or, big stuff, it's like, oh, okay, it makes sense now. It's not just like, wow, I'm getting pulverized by life, which, that sometimes feels like that too. But at least then I can see like, oh, okay, this is just, it's like an initiation. There's going to be a growth out of this. There's a letting go and a rebirth. Mm-hmm. So I love that you bring it in. And it's, even if people don't believe in it, it's like even the little, just following the actual moon phases, or following your own even your solar return year, and just bringing it in and being okay with it, just recognizing that we're not always meant to be constantly expanding or constantly contracting. It's like the ebb and the flow. Yeah. I had just never heard balsamic moon. That is incredible. I love it.
Yeah.
What is I'm curious, do you know what your progressed moon sign? Where's your progressed moon sign right now?
It is in Sag, in the 9th house, and it is the conjunction with the new moon will be about 2.5 degrees. I mean, the conjunction with the sun, which makes the progressed new moon, will be about 2.5 degrees from my midheaven. So there's definitely a strong pulse toward legacy and mission in the world. And my teacher would say that through the 9th house, it's the place of higher education and travel and our philosophies on life and religion, and really religion in the sense of like that which we believe to be true. And as the progressed moon moves through that territory, there's often a revelation of how much you don't know, and where your beliefs actually are evolving and needing to change, and where you are quite literally getting schooled. It's like higher education. Well, you go to school when you realize there's more for you to know. So there's a deep humbling actually that comes from this place, while one of the shadows is also like the idea, this is what I was speaking to earlier without realizing, this shadow of like believing you already know it all. That like there's a knowing, there's a meaning making, there's the, the shadow of the priest that's pontificating about the belief that's fixed and what they know, and there's this finger that's pointing at the moon, instead of letting go through many experiences of many cultures and ways of being and teachings. There's a realization and a dispersal of the energy in a wider context, a wider horizon, which is the gift of this area that says, there's many fingers pointing all at the same moon, and where is my resonance and where is my learning, and let me follow that path. And there's, from that humility, is an opening to receive a deeper teaching around life. And so I pray that I'm definitely getting schooled, and I pray that I'm able to bring those teachings forward into my mission and legacy later in the next 30-year cycle. Like you think I'm 38 right now, right? And I feel like there has been a maturing of myself as a leader, and there's also a part that's like, like I'm a 38-year-old woman. Like I'm a woman now, even though sometimes I feel like I'm still 10, but there's a beauty, there's like a beauty and a grace in aging and maturing in age and in time, the experience that comes with that. While at the same time, there's such an awareness of how much I still have to go, and how valuable elders are, and how, like in this territory, while the moon is traveling through this area of that which you have to learn, there's also this like, wow, as I turn into year 39, that there's so much to go in this next 30-year cycle, that another one of my teachers, who we both know well, he says, in order to become an elder, you first have to become an adult. And so there is just a real recognition of when that inner child wants to take the reins, when we get triggered, and being in the presence of elders in my life has really helped to illuminate for me where it is time to really become an adult, and for my younger parts to listen, to hear that there's an adult here that's coming online and that they can trust, right? And that's steeping through the learning, but the learning sometimes comes through realizing, wow, I really thought I knew what I was doing there. I really thought I knew. And what a freedom that comes with the humility of like, wow, there's actually so much more to know and so much more to grow into. And like, can this season of shedding and letting go make room for that intelligence, that wisdom, and the experience that comes, that is what yields eldership later down the road. So I like remind myself while I'm in the shedding seasons, this is what it takes to become an elder later. This is me becoming an adult, being able to be with all of this. And it's what yields eldership later. It's this type of experience that they've been through and lived through again and again and again and can reflect back upon that allows me to feel like I can lean into the elders in my life and helps me feel safe with them because they really can look from a place of non-judgment and like, oh, you've been there before, like this is what, I'll just tell you what's going on right there, but also in their own humility still, knowing that in their next 20 years, there's all this more to go. I'm just in awe of the complexity and also the simplicity of what it is to be human and how much terrain we're asked to cover in these lives that we are gifted with. It is so full spectrum. My goodness. Oh, and the compassion that I have for the versions of myself and others that were going through big catalysts and shedding seasons like this in earlier stages of my life that did not have the tools or the elders or the teachers or guides, in my life at those times. Of course I leaned, I was reaching for prescriptions or parties or outside sources of help because I didn't know how to be with it all. And so to be soberly moving through a season of such intensity and to call upon the Great Mother in me, for me, is quite a liberating experience. That is a gift in itself, while also very challenging.
The irony. That's how it always goes. These are such beautiful words. I mean, I listen to you and I'm like, this is my prayer for all of humanity. If we can just really have that awareness, I get it. I'm the same way. When I was younger, it's like, oh my God, if I had only known. And, all you can do is forgive, compassion, and, and our whole society, it's like so many people have no even sense of their body, their emotion, it's everybody's looking external. And if there was that awareness of, this is the journey of being human, and it is a growth journey, it is a soul expansion. And to have that awareness of, you're going through this, not because life is hard, but it's like, it's for you. Every time I was telling a story of what happened to me on the eclipse day last week, and I was like, oh my God, I was super triggered by it, but I knew immediately, it was like, whoa, there's something here, even though that was the last thing that I really wanted to happen. There's just having that. And like you said, like being around elders, guides, mentors, people to give us these little words of wisdom and to learn and grow within community and have that around ourselves through this journey. It's like, it's the only way. And I think I think there's so many more people talking about it now. It's like the missing piece in the Western world, especially, but maybe all over the world or in many parts of the world, and why there's so much, this chaos or this feeling of chaos and disconnection and war, It's like, how are we not becoming the adult? And by the way, I love that quote. That is beautiful. Just so incredible. And thanks for sharing about, your personal astrology. It's, it's good for people to hear how you work with it, how you bring in the kind of different seasons, as you mentioned, which I also love. My astrologer talks about everything in a season as well. And that's all it is. It's like, I think if we could all see the perspective, not just with business, but life on earth right now, I think we would have a lot more compassion, understanding for what's happening on a larger scale. And it's always as above, so below. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I say the people I know, which is, everybody I know, most people I know that are walking these really deep, devoted paths, it's like the extremes have just been so strong and they're getting so much stronger. And I really believe it's, increasing our capacity to hold the space through these like larger scale transitions that are happening. Do you ever kind of tune into what you're going through personally and like see what's going on in the collective and know like, oh, okay, like I signed up for this?
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's where also just having that astrological context is so helpful, and I feel like we're all in training, we're all that's the dojo. We're all in our own versions of the dojo of our lives and training to become and gain the strength that the next version of ourselves who's really calling us forward that we need in order to become the next version of ourselves, to hold and steward that which we're here to hold and steward, whether that's to a body of work, of teachings, or a family, or whatever it is that you're here to, support the planet with. I feel that we're always in that process of becoming the next version of ourselves, and the how and the way is so precisely designed. Like I almost can't even be mad at it. When I like really look at the catalysts that are coming up in my life right now, I'm like, wow, that's touching deep. Wow, that's really hitting the spot. And it's hitting the spot with such precision that how could it be bad? How could it be off? I mean, if I spiral into victim consciousness, then yeah, I think it's happening to me and I did something wrong. But like, no, as long as I'm holding, I'm not a victim, and that I'm a creator, and I really tap into the intelligence of my heart. And I know that even if I made a mistake, that I was doing my best with what I had at the time. And I really can look back upon any version of myself and be like, girl, the me today could see what you could have said or done a little different. And you were doing your best, my love. You were doing your best. I love your heart. I see the innocence in your heart. Even if misperception is present from the outside, if there's someone outside of you that isn't seeing you clearly, or that has a judgment or is a reactive, it's up to me to know and to reflect upon myself with grace and with compassion and hold that love. That's protection on the inside. That like I really, really, if you can look back at any version of yourself like you were looking on a movie screen and see that scene replay itself out and look at that one through the eyes of love and like the way God or Goddess would see that one and say, I'm rooting for you. Like, I forgive you. I love you. I know you were doing your best. That is freedom. Yep. That's liberation. That lubricates the path forward, because when we're so afraid of making a mistake or messing it up or failing, we're going to be operating so tightly and in such a state of control, like we're wearing a straitjacket, that we're not even risking the possibility of all of these timelines opening up that are available for the versions of ourselves that are free. And so yes, in that timeline, there's a possibility of feeling something we're afraid to feel, the version where you're less controlled, but there's also the possibility that you will succeed. There's also the possibility that your voice will be heard. There's also the possibility that you'll be seen in a way that goes beyond anywhere you've ever felt seen before. There's also a possibility you'll experience love beyond your dreams, and it's everything has paradox and polarity, right? Like the more we can love to the degree only that we're willing to lose. And so like my dog is teaching me so much. He is my guardian. He is my soulmate. He is my ally. He is my forever animal familiar. The place in my heart that he holds will never be replaced. This is such a special bond. And I am so deeply learning from him how not to cap myself out on love, knowing that I am going to be crushed. And he is always teaching me about love. Love more. And I will not, I am devoted to not upper limiting myself on love out of fear of the pain of that inevitable loss. And I know that will contribute and translate into my romantic partnership in the future. I know that that contributes and translates into my relational field, how much I love all my friends and the women in my life, like, and there are places where I can love them so much and I have to let go. You know, it's this dance always, you know, of receiving and giving, of loving and losing, of it's just, there's so much in there that we can explore, but it all comes from this willingness to make contact with joy just as much as we're willing to make contact with grief.
So beautiful. Oh, thank you for sharing. Well, I want to leave you an opportunity to share what you have coming up. Where can people join in? Anything new that you know of? I would highly recommend checking out the dojoinitiation.com, and you can journey through the whole ecosystem from there. The main place that we have the doors open currently is for the Dojo Woman Collective, which is our membership, where we do sessions every Tuesday, connection calls, expansion calls. We have a monthly gathering every month, and the sisterhood is so real, and we really stand for each other in the light. We celebrate each other's light, and we hold each other in the dark. And I am, like I said, we create what we need the most, and I also am experiencing these women hold me in my, you know, some of my darkest seasons, and just as much as they celebrate me, I'm feeling that hold. And so that's the place where, if you're somebody who's calling in sisterhood, somebody who's calling in support in your evolutionary process, and an emergent meeting of the place where you might benefit from some relational mirroring and championing, that's the place to come, is that Dojo Woman Collective. Beautiful.
And you can also find me on Instagram at Zahara Zimring, and I share a lot of new offerings there as well.
Great. Oh, thank you so much. We'll have the links right here in the show notes. Wow, this was so inspiring, and this is totally what I needed, this conversation after after not only today, but this last 5 days has been super intense. So you know, thank you for the reminders that this is just a journey, you know, and it's like, it's going to take us in the way that it knows what's best for us. And that's all we can do, is really surrender and pray and do our best and be in our hearts. And like you said, like, just deepen that capacity to love more. That's it. What if every human being did this?
Yes, yes.
It's my prayer.
Thank you, Beth, and for your example and prayers and love, you know, to your mama, and just all that you are moving through as well, and the grace with which you're holding it is really inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. It's so good to be with you.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you're feeling inspired, I'd appreciate it if you showed your love with a review. And check out my YouTube channel, where you can find the video version of this podcast. You can also head to bethaweinstein.com to learn more about me and grab my free business growth trainings. Remember, you carry your own unique medicine, and your medicine is what we need for these times.